Republican Seniors of Minnesota. We bring seniors 50 plus together.
Learn about and discuss issues that are important to Minnesotans. Hear from our elected officials and experts on public policy.
Meet political candidates, elect delegates to district and state conventions, and help elect Republicans to office at all levels.
We believe in and advocate for the principles of personal responsibility, economic prosperity, peace through strong national defense,
and limited, sensible government. Republican Seniors of Minnesota. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Republican Seniors of Minnesota. Welcome especially to those who are attending via our video live stream. I'm Carol Brumwell. I'm chair of the Republican Seniors of Minnesota, and I am your MC for this meeting. The meeting is being live streamed by our volunteers. It's also being recorded. A few quick courtesy reminders. The section right there next to the beverage area is off camera, so if you're given the microphone to speak, would you please move a little more towards the center so that people can see as well as hear you. Take side conversations out of the room, although it's a very large room and you'd think that they don't disturb, they do. Also, wait for the microphone, because although you might think you have a booming voice, which I think I have, it somehow gets swallowed up in the room when not everybody's able to hear. Sound check, are you able to hear me now? Okay. If at some time you're not able to hear, start waving your hand like this, and Mike Lehman, who is on our soundboard, will work to get the sound available to you. Did you silence your cell phone in courtesy to our speakers? Please do that. And now join me for an opening prayer. Gracious God, we thank you for this opportunity to gather for a meeting. We thank you for each and every one who is here today. Please bless our speakers this day. Help them to communicate clearly the wisdom they have to share. We pray for those in government office, especially our Minnesota legislature. Help them make laws to protect our freedoms so that we can live peaceful, quiet lives in godliness and dignity. We pray for the judges across our land, from the local level to the high courts. Help them to judge wisely and fairly. Please give them wisdom and discernment to balance justice and mercy. God of peace, help us to see in all others the gifts that they are employing to carry out your will. May we have a spirit of camaraderie in this room and as we work together on our shared mission. Amen. We'd like to acknowledge our military and veterans and active or retired police officers and first responders. Will those people please stand to be recognized? And now everyone else please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Be seated. If you have a brief 30-second, 1-minute announcement you'd like to make, we'll have time at the end of the meeting, just before we do our door prize drawing. And I have a list of people who've asked to speak, and you can just raise your hand. We'll bring a microphone to you. You're welcome to stay in the room for conversation. After the meeting, we have the room until noon, although they may start taking tablecloths off. Go ahead and enjoy conversation with fellow Republicans. I want to say a special thank you to the additional volunteers who have stepped forward and are helping with registration at the back of the room. We are still looking for additional people to serve on our board. We're going to have 2-year terms, as are in our Constitution. We need to elect 6 new board members. Our board is a board of 9, looking for 6 additional people to step up. The time commitment is about 10 hours monthly, in addition to the 3 hours of the meeting time to be here. Roles are listed in the Constitution. We sent out a memo in February where we gave everybody a chance to look at the roles. It's also in the Constitution on the About page on our website. Very last line of the About page is a link to our Constitution. We'll also be electing a delegate and alternate to State Central Committee, and we do have nominees for that. If you are interested, please notify us by March 31st. I had been saying March 1st. I took a look at the Constitution. No, March 31st. It needs to be a week rather than a month ahead of the convention. So our convention is April 8th, which is during our next meeting. We'll have probably 10, 15 minutes of convention time. The rest of the meeting will continue as it always does. And Mike Lehman here is leading the nomination team, and it'll be a team of 3 that will interview the candidates. Our group is again volunteering this year for the MNGOP office. We volunteer monthly, help prepare the envelopes for the PCR receipts so that they get mailed out to people who have made a contribution. We'll meet there at the Edina office, that's just off Highway 100 and 494, on the first Monday of the month. We'll be meeting from 10 until 1 to do that envelope stuffing. Come when you can, leave when you need to. You don't have to tell me ahead of time you're coming. Everyone is welcome to have more hands making light work. I will send out a monthly reminder, though, if you tell me you'd like to see it. So I've got a little sign-up sheet here. You give me your name and email and phone number, and I will keep you in the loop, reminding you of that the first Monday is our stuffing day. On March 24th, which is just 2 weeks away from yesterday, Republican seniors are going to be serving as greeters and hosts for a state party MNGOP meet and greet fundraiser, and that's being held at the North Star Tavern from 4:30 to 6. Chairman Alex Plekish will attend. He'll speak for a couple minutes. I and several of the board members will be there. We'll be handing out our brochures to anybody who looks to be over 50. And telling people what a great organization we are. If you're willing to also help with that greeting and hosting, let me know. Give me a message up here, or just show up and find me there at North Star Tavern on the 24th. I'll give you a stack of brochures to hand out. Our first speaker today is Randy Sutter. Randy is currently chair of the Congressional District 3 Republicans. He's been chair since 2022. Many of us from Bloomington, Edina know him from his 8 years of leadership as co-chair and communications chair for what was then Senate District 49. He's also the husband of Barb Sutter, who is our national committee woman. Randy is a veteran of the U.S. Air Force. He retired as a lieutenant colonel, and he told me to remind everyone that Don Patton, who is our speaker's chair, outranks him. So, Randy also retired from, in his working life, retired from General Dynamics Mission Systems after more than 13 years of leadership roles with avionics and missile electronics. And 11 of those were, I have to turn my page, on the computer systems for the F-18. Prior to that, he was U.S. representative on the NATO program management team, overseeing the acquisition and installation of radar systems improvements on the NATO fleet of E-3A AWACS jets. Randy has a Bachelor of Electrical Engineering from Union College in New York, a master's degree from the University of Utah in Engineering and Industrial Management. I've asked Randy to speak to us about how the various formal structures of the Republican Party work together to identify and support candidates, the importance of local political action to improve our daily lives. Please join me in welcoming Randy Sutter.
Carol, I'm impressed with what you know of my background. I'm glad it was only the good things. So, Carol, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. I do want to share with all of you, if you knew my wife, Barbara, if you know her, she sends her greetings. She is over with her mother, who's celebrating her 96th birthday today. So she was not able to be with us. Hopefully she is in Germany where her mother lives at this point, and hopefully she'll make it back on Friday. But if you know Germany, they've got a airport workers strike, and they never know when those are over. So we'll see. My fingers are crossed. And I do want to say that there are many of you here that I've gotten to know very well because you've come from my neck of the woods. You come from the former Senate District 49, now Senate District 50. And I'm going to try and make sure that I call out everybody that I know from here. But I know he's not here, but Bob McGinnis and his wife Barb, I go back a long way with them. Don Patton, who's already been mentioned before. Al Muirhoff, we've worked together and continue to work together. Both Johnsons, both Chuck Johnson and Don Johnson, tremendous people, and I enjoy them. The Spitznagels, Sarah Amidon, if she's still here, Carol Kerr, if she's here, Dan Hallberg, Mike Lehman, and, of course, Carol Brumwell. So, I am from CD3. I'm the chair of CD3 Republicans, and this is my penultimate speech for the Republicans, as I'll be stepping down at the end of my term in April. Now, as a side note, when Carol Brumwell and I worked together, she would never have allowed me to use a four-syllable word in anything that I wrote, because anything that we were doing had to be targeted at the fourth grade level. That is the best level in terms of getting a speech across and making it understandable. Well, in today's educational environment, it's doubtful that any fourth grader would have any knowledge of a four-syllable word. Most likely, if you're going to communicate with them today, given the culture, it's the four-letter words that you would need to use. So I do want to say that I also want to thank Carol for giving me 15 minutes, because even at my own convention, which will be when I make my last speech, I will probably be lucky if they give me 5. So we'll see how this one goes. This is an important election. I want to make it clear that the Republican Party, many of you already know this, but the Republican Party is a hierarchical organization, starting with the state party that Carol mentioned, having the fundraiser coming up. And we are one of 8 congressional districts within the state. Each one of the congressional districts has a congressperson who's assigned or who's elected there. And we are the party units that are identified with those congresspeople. So there is a congressional district organization, Republican organization, within each congressional district. And then under them are the Senate districts, and in some cases, the county. And because of this situation, we have both counties and Senate districts, and they overlap. We're often referred to as basic party organizational units, or BPOUs. So fortunately for us, here in the metro area, we really don't have a county organization anymore. There's a metro organization. There is a Minneapolis Republican Party, and that is identified just for the city. But within the city even, there are Senate districts, and there are essentially 10 in Congressional District 3, 10 in which we have the whole or the major part of 10 different Senate districts. Interestingly enough, given the alignment of the district lines, we actually have 1 or 2 precincts in 2 others. In Senate District 31 and in 43, we actually have 1 or 2 precincts, and that's all. But okay, so under the Senate districts are the House districts, and then there's the precincts within the House districts. And the precinct organizations are the grassroots for us. And so when you go to your caucus, Generally, that's in February. When you go to the caucus every other year, it's at your precinct level that you'll go, and it's those precinct organizations that we need to help support and build, because they are the spokespeople for us within their neighborhoods. And we very much want to try and help build our BPOUs, in this case our Senate districts, and their precincts to be able to do better in the metropolitan area elections. All right, so that's sort of the hierarchy, and I'm at the CD3 level, which means when we meet, we try and do things for all of the Congressional District 3, Senate districts, and House districts that are here. You may know that within our congressional district, we were unsuccessful in electing a congressperson. Tad Jude did a great job, but we weren't able to get him across the line. But we were able to elect 3 Minnesota House legislators. They're all in sort of the northwest portion of our congressional district. We have Andrew Myers out in Mound, Kristen Robbins up in the Maple Grove and West area, and Danny Nadeau up in Dayton and Rogers. And we also have Warren Limmer, who is in Senate District 37, Maple Grove and West. And I think we've got one more that's up in the Anoka Coon Rapids area that's up in that. So those are the legislators that we have. This coming year, in 2026, next year, we will be seeking to try and ensure that we re-elect all of those people, as well as trying to pick up a few more. It's going to be a challenging year. I mean, certainly the DFL has given us enough opportunities. However, we will be running, as we usually do, against Donald Trump in the metropolitan area. That's usually the way it works. But we'll get onto that in a minute, because certainly the political situation in Minnesota is dynamically changing. This past year in 2024, we had a very close election, as you know, and actually when the courts determined that one elected DFL representative did not in fact live in their district, kicked them out, we got a 1-seat majority. Not that the courts decided that we could get a quorum in the legislature because of it, but momentarily we had it, and all the DFL representatives stayed home. Well, as a result, of course, there was nothing that we could do, because in that situation, the Secretary of State is the chair of the House whenever they're in session, and he would adjourn the meetings whenever they went to try and raise any bills or do any work. But when the DFL stayed out as long as they did, many of you responded by helping us with those recall petitions. And that was a tremendous effort to put all those recall petitions together. And that, I think, ended up, in my opinion, that shamed all the DFL members to come back and sit. But before they did, they had to come up with some kind of a compromise. And that compromise was to identify Lisa DeMuth, Republican, as the House Speaker. And she'll be the House Speaker for the next 2 years under this compromise. Even if the DFL wins the election, which is today in 40B, she will remain the Speaker. And they're also established an election, a fraud investigation committee in the House. And we will have 5 out of the 8 members of that fraud committee, and that will continue to sit. And I expect that we'll hear a lot more about the fraud that we have experienced in Minnesota. What is it, close to $600 million now in terms of identified fraud? And that, I expect that we probably will see more. We will also hear about the lax management that has been present in the state. So I think that's all goodness. And so because of that, I think that there's some good things that are happening, but this is a really dynamic situation. I mean, as you know, while we had Lisa DeMott as Speaker, we've put some bills up there that have been defeated by, again, like one vote. And that usually was because they couldn't get the necessary majority, so we had to have a Republican that would vote against the bill, because under the Minnesota laws, you can only bring a bill back up if you voted against it. So Harry Niska, bless his soul, has been the one that's been targeted because he always has to vote against it, so he can turn around and bring it back up if we should win in 40B. So that's an important situation. Boy. All right, let me just quickly go through a couple of other things. I've talked a little bit about some of these crazy things, like one of the bills that we had coming up was to try and keep boys out of girls' sports and girls' bathrooms, and that was defeated. I think there was also the self-defense situation where if someone is coming at you and you have a gun, we tried to get it such that you could defend yourself with that gun, but no, you have to continue to try and back away as fast as you can and not shoot. These sorts of things that are not common sense, but these are the bills that we're bringing up, and the DFL is voting lockstep against them. You know, I find it interesting that Governor Walz and the leaders of the DFL are blaming President Trump for the budget deficit in the state. You know, how quickly they forget that that deficit was announced last fall. It's maybe grown a little bit, but there was a deficit announced last fall. How quickly they try to point away from the impacts of their own legislation, the legislation that they put in place in 23 and 24. You may not know it, but I wear a turban every once in a while. You know, clearly when the sun comes out, it helps to protect the top of my head. Well, you know, turbans are the sort of thing that you have to start at one side and you have to wrap it around and around and around your head, which can be time-consuming. But I found a way that I can do it without that much trouble. But the question is, do you know how many DFL House legislators it takes to help me put my turban on? 66. One to hold the ribbon next to my head, and I haven't figured out who that DFL guy is yet, but one to put it on my head, and the other 65 to put forth all the legislation that they usually do until my head spins. All right. I thought you'd like that one. All right. So, and I'll do one quote, because how am I doing on time? All right. The Thomas Sowell, you may know, the American economist, 94 years old, bless his soul, still going strong. He said, he's on record as saying, socialism has a record of failure so blatant that only an intellectual could ignore or evade it. Well, in the same spirit, I would say the DFL legislators have so failed to understand the impacts of their overreach that only their party leaders still have the ability to ignore or evade it. So I wanted to just, in the last few minutes that I have, say we have a convention at CD3 that's coming up on April 12th. Are there anyone here that is a delegate to the CD3 convention? I see 5. All right. So to you 5, I will tell, and anyone else that wishes to come and watch it. Oh, yes, and one who will speak at it. Adam Schwarzy will be there to speak, and so another good reason to come to the convention. But we want to try and explain to you at that convention what we've been trying to do over the last 2 years and why we would like to carry it forward and over the next 2 years. And this group is a group that has the potential to really, really help us and make a difference. Those people that are currently working, I understand that that's a full-time effort and you've got families to raise, but when you're in my age bracket, hopefully you have a little bit of additional time, and we need that help. All right? So I am endorsing Stan Hamilton to be the next chair of CD3. He is running. He has been my right-hand man over the course of the last 2 years and has done a tremendous job for us. So, in essence, at this upcoming convention, what we're going to try and do is lay out our plans and our intentions and elect a CD3 executive committee that will help us carry it through. And we ask every one of our vice chairs, and we have 7, to actually take on a responsibility and do something out, whether it be helping us with BPOU development, precinct development, caucus training, candidate training, communications, and that's key. These are really important aspects of our approach. And we would like to try and get people that are motivated to try and help us and actually lead one of these activities to come out and join us. And finally, I'll just mention that our objectives going forward is to build and grow our BPOUs and their volunteers, number 1. Number 2, solicit, train, and coach potential candidates and campaign staff. And number 3, improve and expand our communications, messaging, and database. So these are our 3 key objectives this year, and we have a number of strategies under those that we want to use to try and propel that. So I welcome, if anyone would like to be a vice chair and serve with us, we have a process. The period to nominate yourself for one of those positions is still open and will be open. Please contact me or any member of the executive committee at CD3 if you would like to put your name forward. All right. At this point, I believe I've probably used my 15 minutes of fame. I get that too? Oh, I get to stretch it. All right. So, questions? Oh, Lars.
Loris Holmberg, Plymouth. I was at the SD 42 convention over the weekend. The speaker spoke about the high need to manage media contacts. And I asked her, who is the czar of media contacts in Minnesota for the Republicans? And she said, I don't know, but it would have to come from the Republican Party of Minnesota. And I want to know, who really is in charge of managing media contacts and making sure that we are on television and the local news as much as we can be in the metro area?
Thank you, Loris. I know that they've identified an individual. I think his name is Noel. But all of the people at the MNGOP at this point are working on essentially on a part-time basis, because there's a severe financial shortage up there at this point, and they're trying to pay this individual, and he's done a great job starting off the bat. And I'm sorry I can't give you his full name, but Carol, maybe when you're volunteering over there, or when someone that's there could come up with his name.
It's Noah Round.
Round?
Round. Noah Round.
How do you spell his last name?
Rouen.
Noah Round.
Yes.
Thank you, Jim. All right. So they're very pleased with the work that he's done, because just in the last 2 months, they have actually gotten 3 headlines above the center line of the Star Tribune, having to do with like the recall operation, and I think there was one other thing too. So he is trying to do a good job, but because until they get some additional money to start paying more staff to work longer, we may be somewhat limited on that. We're at our point in CD3, we're trying to identify someone who is willing to work for free on our communication, because we agree that it's critically important. Thank you. Any other questions? Orville
Philbrand, Senate District 51. I know under the last chairman, the state reached out to work better, more cooperatively, I thought anyway, from what I heard, with both the Senate and the House in the state of Minnesota, to try to have cooperative efforts. Does the Congressional District do that also, or how does that fit in?
Yes, as far as the Congressional District is concerned, we work with our legislators. We have a close working relationship with Andrew Myers, Kristen Robbins, and Danny Nadeau. We will have a closer working with Warren Limmer wasn't running this past time, so we didn't really work that closely with him. But when somebody like Andrew Myers or Danny Nadeau have a town hall meeting, that we have promoted those meetings and tried to make sure that people were aware of them and were able to come to them. We do understand, we've heard at this point that some of these town hall meetings are being disrupted because of the people that are concerned again with what's happening in Washington. So I'm not sure what's going to happen with town hall meetings going forward. But we have had an offer that the people that do the videos for your meetings here would be willing to do video presentations for them if they wanted to do it. And that way they could still meet with their constituents but do it on a more virtual basis. So we'll see how that goes forward. That was a recent offer, and I applaud that suggestion. Any other questions? All right, with that, Carol, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you very much, Randy Sutter. Appreciate you being here. And now for our featured speaker, Jim Schultz. Jim is the president of the Minnesota Private Business Council. It's comprised of key leaders from a broad array of Minnesota's privately held businesses. The council works with leaders in government, business, and communities to advocate for policies that will lead to job growth, new business creation, and entrepreneurship, and broad-based well-being for Minnesota's workers and their families. Jim was the 2022 Republican nominee for Minnesota Attorney General, and he garnered 49.6% of the vote. That's the closest Attorney General race in Minnesota history. Jim Schultz will be speaking with us about Minnesota's trajectory on the economy, on crime, on education, and what it means for Minnesota's future. He'll also discuss the policies Minnesota needs if it will again be the North Star state. Please join me in welcoming Jim Schultz.
Thank you, Carol, so much. Really appreciate it. It's great to be with you here all today. I will tell you off the bat, I might be a little bit punchy. My wife and I just had 1 month ago our fourth child, a little boy. Thank you. We had 3 girls at home, 9, 6, and 3. He's the first boy of the family, so he's being doted on by his older sisters. He's also a little bit, and I'll say it here, he's not here, he won't hear, he's a little chunky. He's a big fella. He was 9 pounds, 10 ounces. He just had his 1 month appointment. He's a good eater, too, because he's pushing 12 pounds already. So I'm already getting calls from Division I football schools, it's about his potentially playing. So we'll see how that pans out. But he was up all night last night, so if I'm a little bit punchy today, apologies. But it's great to be with you. Great to be back. Thanks, Don, for the invitation. Thanks, Carol. Thanks for folks for having me here today. I was here in 2022. You'll remember in the Attorney General race, and it's always a pleasure to be here. To tell you a little bit more about what I'm up to here today, and then talk a little bit about Minnesota, our trajectory, and what I think is a lot of hope for the future with the policies that can renew Minnesota here, that can get us on a better trajectory here going forward. So I'm going to take you through this PowerPoint here, go through a bunch of things, and then we'll leave some time for questions at the end and so forth. So. A little bit about what I'm up to. Since my race for Attorney General, I was approached by some business leaders in the state who said, look, we're getting our tail kicked across the board on economic policies, crime, you name it. We're getting our tail kicked as Republicans across the state, so often losing these critical races and things like that. And so they asked me to build this organization called the Minnesota Private Business Council. It's comprised of key leaders around the state, business leaders from privately held businesses, large and small, all focused on policies that can grow the economy, grow jobs, deal with the massive crime issues in our state, deal with the fraud in our state, and we've been doing that ever since. We've also invested heavily politically to elect that Republican tie in the Minnesota House We're going to be really aggressive in 2026 to elect candidates then as well. But we're growing dramatically, and now we've got members all around the state. So I'm out and about a lot, continuing to put miles on the car, almost like I'm a candidate. So it's been great to get to know so many business leaders from around the state here. This was mentioned a little bit earlier. I want to thank you all for your support in the 2022 Attorney General race. It was the closest Attorney General race in Minnesota history. 49.6% of the vote, lost by 0.7% of the vote. It was incredibly tough, to narrowly lose that race. You may remember in the polling going into election night, they had me up by 6 or 8 points, and unfortunately, 2022 wasn't nearly as good of a Republican year as a lot of us expected. But I think it shows that here in Minnesota, we're not some deep blue state. We're getting deep blue policies, these far left policies that look like California, in Illinois, all these crazy policies. But we're a narrowly divided state. There's about 49.5% Republicans, 49.5% Democrats. So when you can get a 49.6% in a state like this, you know that it's not some deep blue state. We're a purple state. We can win in Minnesota. We can turn it around. We got to stay engaged, and I want to thank you again for all of your support in 2022. So with that, I want to shift to where Minnesota is currently, and I'll take you through a number of different things: the budget, taxes, crime. You name it. Minnesota is on a very bad trajectory on a variety of fronts. We'll talk about those, and then I'm going to talk about some hope for the future. So first off, the Minnesota budget. The Minnesota budget is as terrible as it has ever has been. As many people in this room know, in 2022 we had this massive budget surplus, mostly because of all the money that was sent out during COVID that the federal government gave to states to help them deal with the effects of COVID. Well, we had this $19 billion surplus. Democrats looked at that surplus and said, we don't want to do tax relief of any kind. We don't want to do those checks back to taxpayers like we had promised during the campaign. What we want to do is spend this on all of our pork projects, giving out favors to all the groups that give us money during election times, and blew up our budget entirely. Increased the state budget by 40% in a single legislative session. I don't know about you, but 2019, 2021, you name it, Minnesota didn't have a small government at that point, right? Minnesota already had a huge government, and they grew it in one legislative session beyond that by 40%. And so now we're facing the effects of that. We've got just last week it was announced a $6 billion budget surplus. On Twitter, I said, Tim Walz is the most amazing magician. He turned a $19 billion surplus into a $6 billion deficit, just like that. Incredible fiscal recklessness there. I compared him to Kim Kardashian, his spending habits. And so you can see here on the chart, the one on the left is the prior numbers, $5.1 billion surplus, and I was $1 billion deficit. Now it's $6 billion deficit. And they did that despite the fact that they raised taxes in 2023 by $10 billion. So spent the $19 billion surplus, $10 billion of new taxes, and we still have a budget deficit because of the massive spending they undertook, giving out $2 billion to nonprofits in the state, some of whom do some good work, but many of whom have no real track record. There's no process for vetting whether or not they're doing with the money what they promised to do, whether or not they're effective, all that type of stuff. They dumped money into, they did this big renters tax credit to give money to renters. Why do they do that? Well, mostly because there's a lot of Democrat voters amongst people who rent. Nothing against people who rent, but there's a lot of Democrat voters, so they were giving out freebies to the people who vote for them. So a variety of different things, incredibly reckless, and now we're staring down a $6 billion surplus. I mean, it's a $6 billion deficit. I wish it was still a surplus, but Tim Walz wouldn't allow that. So that's our budget currently. Minnesota taxes. You guys all feel this, and I'm sure you all know people who have moved to states like Florida or Texas or South Carolina because they were tired of the Minnesota tax environment. This is just a chart from the Tax Foundation. They rank states in terms of their tax competitiveness based on the various different types of taxes, corporate taxes, individual taxes, you name it. And Minnesota has the 44th worst tax environment in the entire country, the worst in the Midwest. We're right alongside states like California, Washington, New York. What do all these states have in common? Well, they're all losing tons of people to low-tax states. And they're all states whose economic growth, job growth, you name it, is going down dramatically. So you can see here in Minnesota, we got the 43rd highest corporate taxes. We have the second highest tax rate for corporate taxes. So the small businesses out there, you name it, they're paying 9.8% in their tax rates. Individual taxes, 44th highest, and then you can see it going down the line here. So we're overtaxed, and I'll turn to it in a minute. We're not getting the return on investment that we have historically had. Historically here in Minnesota, we've had high taxes, but which had to be lowered, but we at least got good services as a result. We had a good education system, we had good roads, you name it. That is breaking down because DFL governance of Tim Walz and others, has been so horrendous in the state here. But you can see here that Minnesota is incredibly high taxes relative to the rest of the country, and the areas of the country that are growing, that are doing exceedingly well, Texas, Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina, you name it, have a better tax climate. Crime in Minnesota. You may remember in 2020 when everything here in Minnesota blew up. You had the death of George Floyd. You had the immense rioting that took place. Following that, Tim Walz and others sat on their hands as Minneapolis burned, as St. Paul burned. And then you had the incredible recklessness of a lot of state leaders, the Minneapolis City Council, the Attorney General, Keith Ellison, get behind defunding the police. Incredibly reckless conduct. They embraced all these soft-on crime policies that led to this immense increase in crime. Now, you may remember during this time that a lot of our friends on the left said, well, it's just really because of COVID. Everybody's locked down. You got all these young men who are out and about. It's just because it's locked down. It's not because of the policies that we're embracing. Well, now we are 5 years beyond COVID, since the start of COVID, and we still have immense crime problems in our state. And what's the cause of it? Soft-on crime policies that have done so much damage to the average neighborhood, the average community in our state. So zooming into Minneapolis, for example. Minneapolis, this shows homicides since 1990 in Minneapolis. You can see here, that massive spike on the right side of that chart here in 2020, 2021 of murders, homicides in Minneapolis. They've gone down from their historic peak, but they're still dramatically higher than they were prior to 2020. And why is that? You've got still have Keith Ellison in the Attorney General's office. You have Mary Moriarty here in Hennepin County, who is among the worst prosecutors in the United States. She takes every opportunity to excuse violent crime. And then on the other side of it, she takes every opportunity to prosecute cops. Many here will know Ryan Londergan, state trooper, who heroically saved his partner when a man drove away with his partner partially in the car during a traffic stop. He was forced to shoot the man who died. Ryan Londergan is a hero, a Minnesota hero who should be treated as such, but Mary Moriarty sought to prosecute him wrongfully. Meanwhile, you've got these violent murderers out on the street not being prosecuted or being given these lenient plea deals and so forth. And so the message has gone out to criminals in Minnesota that you can get away with serious crime in our state without consequences. That's outrageous, and you're seeing the effects of it here in Minneapolis. The chart on the right is a chart from the Center of the American Experiment. You can see here how Minnesota historically had a lower crime rate than the rest of the country. But you can see here since 2020 and thereafter, we're now a high crime state. We're no longer a low crime state. And why is that? Again, the policies being embraced by people in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and of course our state leadership in Tim Walz and Keith Ellison. And one of the things that it's easy to get lost in numbers on crime. It's like, well, here's the crime rate and things like that. But the fact is, behind every number in a crime statistic are real people, real communities whose lives have been lost, cops who have been driven out of the profession because of the bad policies, the targeting by people like Mary Moriarty. These are real people, real lives. I'm sure many in this room have felt the effects of crime, whether it be break-ins, carjackings, you name it. And so you see that. My sister in early 2021, she lives in North Minneapolis, and part of the reason I got into the AG's race was she was sitting down to breakfast one morning, heard a pop outside her window. Well, there was a man in a gunfight with police officers essentially on her front lawn, multiple bullet holes in her home. And ultimately, she was okay. A police officer had to rush into her home, get her out of the house. But that's the type of thing that stays with you all your life, even if you aren't wounded, aren't killed. And so these crime statistics, particularly in the tougher neighborhoods in Minneapolis, St. Paul, these are good people whose lives are being shattered by these terrible policies embraced by our state leadership. Education in Minnesota. It's hard to know where to start on education in Minnesota. We used to have a good education system that delivered good results. We no longer have that. Under 50% of our kids can do reading and math at their grade level. Under 50%. So you have that, and there's some school districts, there's some schools in the state where 0 kids are proficient in math and reading. That is outrageous. That is absolutely outrageous. Those statistics should keep every single public official in our state awake at night. And the fact is, the reason we have it is because we've embraced all these policies, including the long COVID lockdowns, including so many other different things that have left our kids behind. It is outrageous. So just in terms of basic education proficiency, can our kids read, write, do math at grade level? We're not getting it done. Also, a lot of the content, we're all familiar with this, a lot of the content in our schools is anti-American. You got all this Looney Tunes stuff around gender identity, you name it. You've got boys and girls sports. You've got all this content in our educational curriculum that is really harmful to our kids, that shouldn't be there, that denigrates America, that denigrates the country that has delivered so much to us, to the world, and so forth. So we need fundamental reform of our education system. There's a lot to be said there. I'll come back to. But right now, our education system, there's a lot of good teachers out there. There's a lot of good people involved in the education system. But the fact is, our education system, as it's currently constituted under GFL leadership, is simply not getting it done for our kids in the state of Minnesota. Fraud in Minnesota. We've all seen this. It seems like every other day now there's a new fraud uncovered in the state. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. You catch only a fraction of the fraud that's out there. But we have, for the first time in our history, we're a state that has serious fraud in our government programs, our public programs. This is a tracker. Some of you may follow Bill Glann at the Center of the American Experiment. He's created this tracker of all the fraud in our state, and Randy referenced it earlier. But you can see here, $610 million of fraud in public programs in the state. $610 million. That's just incredible. I've done the math on this, and you could give every single teacher in the state a $30,000 bonus if you just got rid of this fraud. You could do. Same is true for our cops. You name it. There's so much that you could do with that quantity of resources, but instead it's going to buy 3rd, 4th, 5th homes for fraudsters. It's absolutely outrageous. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. So the question is, who's looking over the fraud? So it's a good question. One would think that in the state of Minnesota, a state-run program, that you would have state officials looking at it, right? You would have Tim Walz's administration. You had people looking at it. You have the Attorney General's office, who is charged with ensuring that there's lawful administration of public programs. Well, you would be wrong if you thought that. Essentially, the state, although Tim Walz claims to want to do these reforms to add an inspector general and things like that, the state has essentially sat on their hands as hundreds of millions of dollars has been stolen by Minnesotans. The public body that has done something is the U.S. Attorney's Office. So the prosecutors that are the local affiliate of the Federal Department of Justice, they've prosecuted a fair bit of this fraud. The Feeding Our Future fraud. There's one portion of the trial of some of the defendants there is going on as we speak. Right now, they've gotten some convictions on the Feeding Our Future fraud. But broadly, state officials have been totally out to lunch on this. A lot of different reasons for that. But the fact is that Tim Walz can go out there all the time and say he's very angry about all this fraud. He did a press conference to that effect. He's very angry about all this fraud. We're going to get to the bottom of it. Well, somebody needs to remind him that he's been governor for over 6 years in the state of Minnesota. He's been governor for over 6 years. This fraud's been going on for 6 years during his governorship, and now he's suddenly saying, well, I'm very worked up about this fraud. We got to do some stuff. Well, sorry, Tim, you're 6 years too late. You're 6 years too late, Tim. The fact is, hundreds of millions of dollars are getting stolen from people in this room here, our tax money, and nobody's done anything about it. State officials haven't done anything about it. And they proposed some reforms that I view as simply moving around the deck chairs on the Titanic. Fundamentally, they will not reform our system in ways needed to ensure that this doesn't happen in the future. I mentioned the U.S. Attorney's Office. This is a quote from Andy Lugar, whose office has prosecuted a lot of these. This is a Democrat. Andy Lugar's appointed by Joe Biden, a Democrat, saying Minnesota has a fraud problem. No other states have had the kinds of problems we've had in Minnesota government. Yes, sir.
Wait a minute.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to have questions and answers following him.
This is just a quick one. How come no one has introduced articles to impeach him at this point? I feel like we're sitting on our hands. This should have been done a long time ago.
To impeach Tim Walz?
Somehow get him out of
Yeah. Well, Well, boy, yeah. I mean, he's one challenging thing in state legislators. You'd have to ask some of the state legislators their thinking on it there too. One challenging thing in Minnesota is our recall process is as hard as it is. I've been of the view that we have to reform our recall processes. Basically, in Minnesota, if you're a public official and doing a terrible job, everybody knows it. You essentially can't be recalled, with some exceptions, but you essentially can't be recalled from office unless you commit, you yourself are stealing public money. You yourself are committing crime, basically. Even if you're totally negligent, you totally failed in your job, you name it. Mary Moriarty should be recalled from her office, you name it, but you can't do it under Minnesota law. We have to reform our law, so basically you get some signatures. To get a recall petition on the ballot, and then you can vote on it. Right now, it's incredibly hard. It's got to go to the Supreme Court, then go back to the Secretary of State. It's incredibly hard. That's part of the problem we've got right now. So the state legislators could speak to why there hasn't been a move to impeach Tim Walz. But I will say, right now, our state government is functioning at a lower level than it has in its entire history. It's incredible. So, what Minnesota needs going forward here? We've gone through all the problems in our state right now: the budget, education, crime, you name it. What does Minnesota need for the future? We need massive tax relief. We've all got friends who've headed to other states in part for tax reasons. We're as I mentioned earlier, we're the 6th highest tax state in the country. We need dramatically lower taxes. We need. My view is we should eliminate the lowest tax bracket in the state. It's 5.35%. Basically, everybody in the state would get a $2,500 tax cut every year. That's a good starting point. $2,500 back in your pocket every year. Working Minnesotans would benefit from it immensely. We got to lower our corporate tax rate, where it's the 2nd highest in the country. We should get it out of the top 10. We should lower it from at least 9.8% to 8%, probably more. We have to restore public safety to our state. That starts with unelecting Keith Ellison, unelecting Mary Moriarty here in the state. But we also have to do other things. The way in which our cops have been treated in these recent years is an absolute disgrace. We've got to invest in retaining and recruiting police officers. Minneapolis still has about half the police officers they need to do their job. So a lot of crime. Our crime statistics are a little off by virtue of the fact that a lot of crime goes unreported when people know that cops don't have the resources to respond to them. So petty, thefts and things like that don't get reported because cops just simply can't focus on them. They're focused on those record murders in the state. So we need more cops on our streets, and we need to support our law enforcement. We need greater penalties for things like fentanyl dealing, a variety of other different increases in penalties that we need. We need to end the fraud. The state officials, as I mentioned earlier, members of state government have been totally out to lunch. DFL leadership have been totally out to lunch in terms of dealing with the fraud in our state. What I think we need to do is empower local prosecutors around the state. So each county has a county prosecutor. They've got a team under them of our 87 counties. Any county attorney should be allowed to prosecute cases related to fraud. So even if, say, fraud occurs in Ramsey County, related to a state program, you could have an aggressive prosecutor in Wright County go ahead and prosecute that case, prosecute those wrongdoers, and show that there actually is consequences in Minnesota for stealing money from the average Minnesotan. And so that's one piece of it, of what we need to do there. Our state agencies need fundamental reform, fundamental oversight reform, whistleblower protections, you name it, so that the fraud can be uncovered within our state agencies. That starts with a new governor. We need a new governor to fundamentally reform our state agencies in the state here. And then we just need basic electoral reform in the state. It should be easy to vote and hard to cheat in the state. We aren't doing the very basic things like voter ID. Voter ID is just an obvious thing that we need to do as a state to ensure that our electoral systems are in fact have electoral integrity and so forth. I wrote a piece a while back. I'm surprised that the Star Tribune printed it, but I say we need to de-woke Minnesota government. We need to get all this woke lunacy out of Minnesota government, whether it be in ensuring that ensuring that the hiring is DEI focused, whether ensuring that hiring is not DEI focused and in fact focus on merit, ensuring that our education curricula in the state is consistent with American values and so forth. And so we desperately need to do that as well. So that's a few things. Coming back to hope for the future, we need in our state to again elect Republican leadership. We've got to win a statewide race in 2026, whether it be the U.S. Senate race. I know Adam's running for that, governorship, attorney general, up and down the line. Everybody's up in 2026. We have to get a statewide win to begin unraveling some of the lunacy that has led Minnesota to this point. We can do it. My race in 2022 showed it. 49.6% of the vote in a state demonstrates that we're very close to being able to win here in Minnesota. We're doing better in greater Minnesota than we ever have. We've got to do better in places of the suburbs, places like Bloomington and elsewhere, and then hold our margins in places like Minneapolis and St. Paul and do a little bit better there. We can win statewide, and we have to win statewide if we're going to have a state again that delivers for the 5.5 million people here, that delivers what they're entitled to as Americans, as Minnesotans, and so that we can again be the state that we once were, the state where everybody had opportunity and security in our state here. So thank you so much for having me. It's really great to be with you here. Yeah. Yes. Yes, sir. Yes. Al. Oh, yeah.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
Something that I've thought about a few times. I heard somebody on national radio talk about it for another state just last week because somebody wrote a book. But I had heard in the past that in Minnesota, 1/3 of the occupations require some kind of licensing.
Yeah.
And I happen to know, like one of the areas right now, psychologists. There's a big shortage of psychologists, and I could be wrong. I think they have to put in like 2,000 hours of like a apprenticeship. But it seems to me that's where we're talking about not having enough people in the labor force in the future. Well, if you want to get people from out of the state or people to stay here, you can't have all these licensing requirements. I mean, I've heard they have bad licenses just to be a manicurist in Minnesota. They hardly have any rules in Iowa, where I'm from, but here they've got a bunch of hours they have to put in.
Yeah. Occupational licensing reform is something that other states have done. Arizona has done it, things like that. It's an obvious thing that we should be doing. One, it helps businesses get the labor they need, get the workers they need. But if you're just say you're a single mom out there trying to get into a profession, if you've got to undertake, who knows, 2,000 hours to become, to cut hair or whatever, 500 hours, you name it. That's a huge obstacle to entering on the ladder of climbing up economically and so forth. So you're right, we do have to streamline and in some cases eliminate occupational licensing requirements for people to enter the labor force, get good paying jobs, and then ultimately it's good for our economy more broadly as well. So totally agree, and it's one obvious. There's some policy issues that are just total layups that nobody loses at all. This is one of them, absolutely. So thank you, Al. Yes, sir.
I don't need the mic. My voice is big enough. Yeah. You guys all think I need the mic? All right, I guess I'll use the mic. This is my first meeting here. I really appreciate all of you guys coming out here today. I'm a small business owner. I have two things I'd like to say. First is I disagree every time we call the opposing party the DFL. If you saw me get up, I'm a farmer, I'm a carpenter. The DFL stands for Democratic Farmer Labor Union. Why are we giving that to them? We need to change our name to reflect that we're Republicans, we're for labor, we're for veterans, we are for many education, we're for the environment. These are things that are causing us to lose Minnesota. I'm going to stress the environment. I'm a young man. I live here in Minnesota. I hunt, I fish. Every time I hear something about the mining or the oil or something like that, I go, oh, we lost all those votes. Our party has not identified with the environment, and that is number one reason why we're losing in Minnesota. You can say all these great things up here that we need to change this, and until we change our audience who we're going after, we will not be able to take over this state. We're going to keep losing it to the same people. So I'm here today because I'm going to get involved, and I'm going to help make some of these sweeping changes. So you need to help guide me and tell me what organizations I can get into to bring all of the guys that I employ as a tradesman and as a small business owner. On the small business owner end of things, the 14-point misclassification law. Are you familiar with that?
The independent contractor classification. And
very, very serious piece of legislation that has already gone through. As a carpenter, as a business owner right now, me and every single one of my guys below me are ready to lay down our hammers and say, I'm not going to work for this. That is an incredible piece of legislation that's passed through that no one seems to know about. And unfortunately, it's before a judge, but it is also up to him right now. So I'd like to hear what you have to say about that, because that's a very, very serious piece of legislation.
Yeah, so this is, and I don't claim to be an expert on it, but fundamentally, we've seen this kind of incredible growth nationally in independent contractors, and there's different terms for it, the gig economy, things like that. And what a lot of liberal policies want to do is to take us back 50 years, more or less, to get back to a world in which a massive percentage of, nothing against labor unions, but a massive percentage of people are in labor unions, are classified as regular employees with all the requirements that go along with it, and not as independent contractors. And so there's a big liberal push to push people back to the way it was, 50 years ago. Now, it is a problem. We have to ensure that people who want to work within the kind of gig economy, independent contractors, you name it, that they are allowed to do so and not be forced into this kind of rigid employer-employee framework that works in many professions, works for in many jobs, but doesn't work in others. And so it's well taken. It's an important regulatory issue that we've got to address. On the environment, Republicans, my view on the environment is Republicans need to talk about conservation a heck of a lot more. Talk about protecting our natural resources, ensuring that our lakes and streams are clean, clear, and so forth. Now, I think where I don't think Republicans should be out there. My view is I think we should. There's responsible mining that you can do, and it's better in our backyard than in other parts of the world where they don't have the labor standards we have, where you don't have the environmental standards, and where we can where we can do immense good by virtue of the resources that can be extracted and so forth. So I do believe you have to have a pro-mining agenda, but that is responsible and that ultimately protects our environment in ways that are really important. But yes, ma'am.
My name is Debbie Bowe. I'm from Chanhassen. Before I make my comment, I want to point something out in the background. My husband is a former city council member, and one of the things that would happen at city council time and time again is people would come forward and they would say, how come I never heard this was coming? And what the answer is it was passed 5 years ago, and if you're not really paying attention, you don't know that. But when it comes down to the actual law coming forward, making changes, they're surprised. They don't know, and then the cities will say something like, well, if you would have looked at the documents, you might have seen that, and so on and so forth. Okay, that brings me to my comment. It's a little different, but I'll put it out there. Has everybody noticed all the massive apartment buildings that are coming up all over the place? At first you think, oh, that's nice. This must be affordable housing. No, I don't think it is. I think it's part of a rewilding process where eventually they're going to take people and say, we got a place for you. You give up your property and you're going to end up there. If you look at somewhere like China, what you see is the big cities and the big, tall skyscrapers. One time within the past year or so, my husband and I watched a program on TV where these two young men took motorcycles and rode across China. There's all kinds of beautiful countryside without those big apartment buildings that they have. And I think that's what's happening here. Because a lot of this stuff, they may have passed it 5-10 years ago, and county and stuff, they take what they're told to do and they tick along and they do it. And I think we're going under a rewilding process. And maybe you have comments, maybe you don't. But they are coming up everywhere. I have family in central Minnesota. You drive out and you see these big, massive apartment buildings coming up. And I'm thinking, who's moving in? We got a low birth rate. And I don't think it's just the illegal immigrants kind of issues either. I think it's ultimately meant for us. That's just my 2 cents. So thank you for listening.
Some laws kicking into place, 5-10 years later. It's interesting they do that. They did that with paid family medical leave, where it's convenient for a legislator to have something kick in way in the future, right? Because if it's unpopular at that point, they may be out of office. Things may be different and stuff like that. So not infrequently they'll push the unpopular stuff out to later points. But I think I saw a hand. Yes, sir.
Ronald from Edina. So thanks for coming today. I appreciate it. Yeah. Question for you concerning the fraud that we're putting in place. I think one of the things that's hopeful for the federal government and all the chaos they're going through is that they put in some type of measuring system, right, that we can do the transparency and see where we're spending our money.
Yep.
I think that's useful.
Yep.
Are we going to do that at the state level?
Yes. Well, I think we absolutely have to. Right now, if you look at the state budget, I had it up earlier. You've really got two big drivers. You got social welfare programs, and then you've got the education, more or less, and then you've got a fairly small chunk of the budget that's kind of other stuff. But the fact is that the reason we've got to this point of just incredible recklessness in our state spending of $6 billion deficit and things like that is the Democrat Party, well taken on that. Thinks money grows on trees, and you don't have to keep tabs on it and stuff. And I think it's great, when the federal government's, putting up there, we cut $1 billion this year and, things along those lines. That's what it's going to take, both, measuring where the money's going on out the door and where we can cut. And so I think absolutely we've got to be dramatically more rigorous, in our state budgeting process, and so forth, 100%. Yes, sir.
Hi, Jim. Ron Exday, Bloomington.
Yeah, good to see you, Ron.
Minnesota Private Business Council. What size businesses do you work with? Do you have volunteers? Do you take donations? Is there membership? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes, absolutely. So I appreciate the invitation there, Ron, to give a little plug for the organization. So you can go to the website. It's growthmn.com is the website. Anybody can join. An individual can join. A business can join. To just kind of get our emails and things like that. It's $100 a year. You can sign up. You get our emails, get our information, things along those lines. For the kind of standard membership, it's kind of at a higher price point, and people can reach out on that. But it's everybody from small businesses of 1 or 2 people to very large companies in the state of 1,000 or more, and so forth. So we've got about 200 members now, all around the state of various sizes, and it's anybody who shares our principles, who shares our vision for a state that has growing jobs, growing economy, that has safe communities, that deals with the immense fraud in our state. Anybody can join. So, thank you, Ron. Appreciate it. Yes,
Jim, since the Trump administration's come in, there's been a lot of announcements about new industries, new companies being built. And the concern I've got is most of these are very high tech, and we see the terrible deflation of our educational system, the scores. Have you got any comment? I put all this back on the problem with the teachers' unions. You know, I feel so lucky of the school teachers that I had that demanded read and write and arithmetic. But how do we get back? Because even if we have all of these great industries, if we don't have the people to make them work, they're going to fail.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, in education, whether you think about it from a kind of societal perspective, we need educated people to make thoughtful decisions about our governance, to lead businesses, to be good, effective workers in businesses, and so forth. But also at the individual level, education, a sound education is a pathway to economic success, to a life well lived, and so forth. And we're not delivering that to so many of our kids here in the state. So it's a massive issue. When you think about, I talk with a lot of employers out there that are worried about, one, just getting the labor, and two, is the labor, educated? Do they have the skills needed to succeed on the job? And when you have 50% of kids who can't do grade level math or reading, that's a huge question for the future. And a lot of the potential jobs, as Don mentioned there, are kind of in the high tech sector and things like that in the future, immense advancements in artificial intelligence and things along those lines. So our kids, if they're going to succeed in the future, are going to need to have an education system that's delivering for them. And right now, courtesy of a lot of just crazy far left policies, they're not getting it. So, Don, it's a massive issue, and you're right to focus on it. Yes.
Yeah, a couple points. On the microphone, we need to use a microphone because there's people watching on video outstate, and they want to hear what we're saying. Second of all, I was at my recent convention, and Representative Robbins spoke, and she's on the fraud committee. And what she stated was exceptionally surprising to me. She said she was stunned about what she's found out when she started to interview some of these chairs and the committee heads and so on, department heads in government. She said they're Democrats, of course, but they allocate these monies and they put these monies out to these departments, and there's not the oversight and responsibility to oversee where these monies are going. They pass it on to another department. Somebody else is doing it. They don't want to hurt somebody's feeling. Her description was it's a cultural dynamic. So it's additionally more than fraud. It's a cultural perspective on how they allocate funds and how they hold responsibility for it. And that's one of the things that they're going to try and change in Congress or Minnesota House is to get responsibility involved. My question for you, Jim, is how are companies going to be handling these new mandates that are coming out in the next year or so? What's happening in Minnesota?
Well, there's a lot of worries out there. Thanks for the question, Scott. So many people in the room know in 2023, 2024, the DFL passed a variety of new workplace mandates. There's sick and safe time, paid family medical leave, and so forth. kind of regardless of kind of what you think about them, their value or not, these are immense new burdens on our employer and our employers in the state. It's very difficult. So under the paid family medical leave, an employee can step away from the job for reasons beyond mothers having birth and things like that. A variety of different reasons an employee can step away for a really extended period. I believe it's 120 days or something like that. So if you're a business of 3 or 4 people in greater Minnesota, and you're already having trouble finding work, and somebody is gone for a few months, that's a huge burden on your business. So it's a huge. You talk with business owners out there, greater Minnesota in the metro. They're very worried about it. It goes into place in 2006. In 2026. So it's a huge issue. There's a lot to be said there. It was interesting. It's paid for. This new system is paid for by a tax that both employers and employees pay. It was estimated at one level. It's already 50% or 25% higher than they projected originally when they passed this thing. It's going to go up higher. Other states who have this, it keeps climbing up and climbing up. So there's going to be less pay in employees' paychecks. There's going to be less take-home revenue for the for businesses. It's going to be a huge new liability for us. And now you've got 500 more state workers that have been hired, in the process of being hired to run this program, as though Minnesota government wasn't big enough. So there's a lot of ways to deliver paid family medical leave with a private sector approach. They set that aside entirely, and now we got this government-run program that's going to be really damaging for our state. Yes, ma'am.
A few years ago, I was on a negotiation team I was a state employee at the time. Yeah. And several of the girls on the negotiation team wanted paid medical leave. They wanted 12 weeks for them, 12 weeks for their husband so that they could have a baby. And the older ones on the team, there was like 40 of us, just about had a heart attack. And they dropped out, and they eventually went and worked for nonprofit because they could get all those benefits that they wanted. And it was like, when are you going to work? Who's going to do your job? And they said, well, that's not important. I need these benefits.
Well, that's representative. It's important that our legal system is set up to protect employees as well as employers, and you got to make sure that employees are treated appropriately and stuff like that. But the fact is that this kind of a one-size-fits-all, mandate that every employer, no matter the size, sometimes these mandates kick in at 100 employees or more, things like that. But no, these mandates kick in for every single business in the state, immensely burdensome, and ultimately aren't going to be good for workers because you're going to have businesses go out of business, leave the state, you name it. And the fact is that a lot of these things too, if you're a Target, if you're a massive business like Target, you kind of build it into your cost structure, you can kind of staff for it appropriately, things like that. It's much harder to deal with if you're in a business of 2, 10, 50 people, and it's really our small businesses that are going to bear the brunt of this. So, well taken. I think that's it. Really great to be with you guys. Keep staying the fight. We can win in Minnesota. We can turn our state around, but it takes all of you continuing to engage. So thank you so much for being here, and thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
What a terrific presentation. And as has been mentioned, we do video record these, so if you were taking notes as fast as I was and weren't quite fast enough, you can go back and listen to Jim and recatch those points you missed. Thank you so much, Jim. In closing, our next meeting is April 8th. Our featured speaker will be Steve Hunnigs, who's Executive Director of the Jewish Council. He'll provide us a status report of the war in Israel, Gaza, Yemen, Lebanon, and Syria. He'll also speak about the Trump effect on those wars. We'll also be conducting our brief convention, as I have mentioned a couple times, that will be to elect our Republican seniors, board members, and the delegate alternate for State Central. Again, that'll be a very brief convention, probably not more than 10-15 minutes, and that will be in place of our normal first speaker. Are there any guests or first-time visitors here? We've got a bunch of guests and first-time visitors.
I brought my friend Genevieve Adams. She's from Romania.
Hi, I'm Jay Satterbeck. Been joined last year, but this is my first meeting. So, I live in Scott County in Credit River. I'm city councilman for Credit River. I'm also a MNGOP state central delegate.
Thank you. Welcome. Other guests or first-time visitors? One back here. Mike?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Sabrina Stahn, I'm from Bloomington, and I brought my friend from Brooklyn Center, whom I grew up with, and she doesn't want to talk.
Okay. Thanks for bringing a friend. Everybody emulate her. Bring a friend next time.
My name is Butch Strand. I'm from Minneapolis. I'm one of the last 29 Republicans in Minneapolis.
We have another Republican here, I think maybe out in the van. So he works with our video team. So we'll make sure you get to meet him.
Okay. The reason I'm here is the persistence of Chuck Johnson.
Chuck, good job. Okay. Another first-timer here.
My name is Joe Slavic. I already got up and spoke, obviously. I'm from Independence, Minnesota.
Wow. I
own a small business called Minneapolis Garage Builders. Most of our business is right down there in the heart of all the libs. But I'm also a veteran. I also own a farm. I have kids. I'm for the environment. There's many things that our Republican Party is not identifying with Gen Zers who Roz came up earlier and said that. So I plan to continue coming here and speaking up. And you guys might get sick of hearing from me, but I'm going to keep hitting some of the same points that I feel are important until they're answered, and then I can move on to the next one. But I'm not going to stop. I'm resilient, and this party needs to bring more people aboard, and we need to identify with those people. And one last little point, GOP. I hear that all the time. For years I was confused. What does that mean? Grand old party. It means nothing to me. Why don't we do something like Republican, veteran, farmer, labor, environment, some acronym that identifies all those people so these Gen Zers that did what I did, going GOP, I don't know what that means, kind of start identifying with the name, and we can take that away from the Democrats because we need to.
Thanks for your comment, and we're happy to have you here.
Denny Wilson, I retired and came up from Iowa, where we have a good governor and 2 good senators. My first time here.
Thank you. Any other first time or visitors? That's it. Thank you so much, and we're happy that you're here. Adam, you want to say hello? Okay, quick.
Hey, I'll be 1 minute because hopefully Carol will have you back for the whole candidate spiel. I'll be 10 to 15 minutes and talk about everything, but 4 points I want to get across. Thank you for everybody's reading my lit today. It's great to be here. Adam Schwartz, I'm running for U.S. Senate. I'm the only declared and filed candidate from Minnesota. Hope to make you proud. I'm from Bloomington, right here. It's a few blocks away. I grew up playing hockey at the Big my whole life. I am a veteran as well, 20-year veteran, retired Marine Corps infantry, and the Navy SEAL officer. So the 4 things I want to get across to you is who I am. You have the bio, but why this race is really important. We have a historic opportunity with Tina Smith stepping down because of all of her insider trading. During COVID, when we were locked down, she sold you out. When you couldn't go to church, you couldn't have your businesses running, she was insider trading at the Senate and takes her bags of money down in Naples, Florida now that she's retiring. This is truly a historic opportunity. Why is that important? Because our nation is on the line. President Trump's agenda is working, but he doesn't have enough reinforcements in Washington. I mean, who's embarrassed right now of all your Minnesota politicians statewide? I mean, yeah, it's embarrassing. Wisconsin, you see them crushing it. North Dakota, they figured it out. Truly, we need some fighters. I'm not a politician. I'm an outsider. I fought my whole life. I'm grounded in values. I'm a constitutional conservative. I've been all around the world in 9 deployments to 70 countries. I see how everybody else does it. Minnesota, the United States, truly beautiful, special places worth fighting for. And lastly, I want to close with why I'm going to win. In an industry where 93% of incumbents time and time again win, the systems are set up for the incumbents to win. Somehow, last midterms, we had 5 of 7 Navy SEALs beat the odds. Midterm elections. I'm happy to report now, this last cycle, the presidential cycle, we went 1 for 1 in the Senate. Another Minnesota Navy SEAL, United States Senator Tim Sheehy, is now the U.S. Senator of Montana. So, yeah. So, it's not that we're that amazing people. We're just very common, grounded people with great values who build great teams. And I'm building a team this cycle for a really important, historic event. This is my no-fail mission now. God bless America. I hope you join me.
Thank you, Adam. We do allow people who are seeking endorsement a 3-minute speech at one of our meetings, and we'll have Adam back for a 3-minute speech, not a 15, Adam. I have a few other event announcements. In addition to that March 24th event, which is here in Bloomington at the North Star Tavern, we have Take Charge, which is a conservative organization. Kendall Qualls leads that organization. They're hosting a fundraiser gala Saturday, April 12th in Eagan, starting at 5:30. The keynote speaker will be Lieutenant Governor of Virginia Winsome Earl Sears. Individual tickets are $150. I have the brochure up here. Anything that I'm announcing, I will have the brochure up here. Use your phone to take a picture of it so other people can still read the information. I don't try to make multiple copies of things. So appreciate you take a picture of it. Go to these events if they are of interest to you. The congressional districts are holding their congressional conventions, and I encourage you, if you are a delegate, alternate, or a guest at one of those CDs, do take some of our literature. It's up available here. We have our what we call our rec card, and we also have little business cards. Hand it to anybody who looks over 50. That's my best guideline for you. If they say they're still working, tell them that's okay. You can watch it on live stream or video. Tonight in Apple Valley, we have Senate District 56 is hosting a Pints and Politics, and Alec Plakish is going to be at that event. That's at Bogart's on Garrett Avenue. And Alex is going, again, to meet and greet, talk to Republicans. The special election that's been mentioned a few times is today in House District 40B, and everybody who lives in 40B should have heard from us at least 6 times. Get out and vote. If you know somebody who is in that area, Roseville, Shoreview, call them and ask them, have you been out to vote? We need this seat. The endorsed Republican is Paul Wickstrom. His website is Wickstrom, the word FOR spelled out, house.com. Again, please encourage people to vote. On April 3rd, which is also the day that we're going to be at MNGOP stuffing envelopes, if you're not with us, please go to a Women's Day at the Capitol. It's hosted by the Minnesota Federation of Republican Women. That's from 9:15 to 1. You're going to be getting the insider's news about the state legislature. You'll visit the Senate chamber. You'll hear training from women legislators. Reservations are requested. Kathy Tinglestead is the contact person. I have, again, brochures up here that includes her contact information. Bring a friend next time when you come here to Republican Seniors. Hand out our cards, our rack card. If you know of somebody who would be a good speaker for our first hour speakers or for our featured speakers, tell us about it. I have little forms up here. You can just grab one and write out the person's name, contact information, your name if that's helpful in getting their attention that we would like them to speak. We're also interested in your ideas of ways that we can help you meet each other. We tried a couple times last fall of having people sit by cities. Got feedback, that was too rigid. So now we put out the city plaques, and if you would like to sit by somebody who's in your city, grab a city plaque there next to the check-in area and put it by your table, and maybe somebody who's from your city will show up with you. Are there 30-second announcements? I know of at least 3 people, oops, 2, because Adam got his more than 30 seconds already. And Elaine Loesch has information about Speaking Proudly. Elaine? Okay, try again. It's on now.
Okay, it's a biannual speaking competition for high school girls. If you have granddaughters, this is an amazing project. It's the 4th one that's being held, and these girls will give you hope for the future. Those speeches that they give are amazing. It's held at the Minnesota Capitol. They present in chambers, and they have judges, professors, senators who judge the competition. $6,000 in cash prizes. And this year's topic is the consent of the governed in America's 250th year. I have a whole bunch of these in the back. I'll be back there.
Thank you. And that the Speaking Proudly is on November 8th, right?
Yes.
Okay. It's all on the brochure. Okay. And then Ron, you had asked to speak?
Yes. Ron XM, Bloomington. I work with Residents for a Better Bloomington, known as RFAB. Bloomington this year has 4 school board races, 3 city council races. Our typical help to candidates is, thanks for running, hope you can do it. We're trying to change that. Dan and Don are going to hand out a sheet. Hey, Dan and Don, hello. Now.
Please,
pretty please. What we're trying to do is look at the things for setting up a candidate, because all 7 of them are going to have to set up the campaign, and they're all going to go through exactly the same steps. So why send them out on their own to do it? Why don't we bring the expertise in this room and other people that we're working with, where somebody knows the finance stuff, somebody knows the rules, somebody knows how to the key website stuff. Not on the campaign side, just expertise to help them on the timing and action and priority of the steps. So we're looking for a little help to create those one-page document on each category, maybe an hour at a meeting with the candidates on how to implement it, and then kind of a recap at the end. Because if we create that template this year, we can use it again next year without a lot of upfront work. So anybody that has expertise in any of those areas or something else you're thinking of on that sheet, please contact me. Information's on the bottom. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Is there anyone else who has a 30-second, 1-minute announcement? Okay. Time for our door prize drawing. If there are extras of the sheets, the front 2 rows here didn't get sheets, so thank you. If you have number 0727, I have a door prize for you. 0727. Anybody raising their hand? You have it. Okay, great. We have one winner. Zero 0712. 0712. Oh, you got them both. All right, come on up. Thank you. We'll see you April 8th. Bye-bye.
Republican Seniors of Minnesota. For more information, please visit republicanseniorsmn.com. While visiting our website, you can click on the video tab to watch videos of past meetings. Also, look for other tabs that bring you to our live player and other special video programs. Or on YouTube, search for Republican Seniors of Minnesota.